Open world games and FPS games are two of the most popular genres in the industry right now. They each have a ton of variety, but what happens when they come together? What happens when an FPS game and an open world game collide? What is up, everybody? Jimmy or Chaos. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about what I think are the 10 best open world FPS games ever made. Do me a favor. Let's set a like goal of 1,000 likes on this video, and let's see if we can knock that out in the first 48 hours. Let me know down in the comments what you think the best open world FPS game is, and let's get started. At number 10, The Outer Worlds, developed by none other than Obsidian Entertainment. Basically a follow-up to Fallout New Vegas, but you had a new setting, you had new continuity, and a new storyline. This FPS RPG had a lot of weapons, you had gadgets, all kinds of stuff you could choose from as you venture across the galaxy, lying and deceiving your way through dialogue choices while learning more about the various colonies that had been ravaged by this shady intergalactic mega corporation. The game was very similar to the Xbox 360 era of Fallout, but that was in a good way. The dialogue choices and the RPG mechanics are very deep here, but the FPS combat is also fun and satisfying. Obsidian, for all their faults, they really know how to merge RPG and FPS in an engaging way. At number 9, Stalker 2. One of the most recent games on the list today. Stalker 2 dropped late 2024 after this long development cycle, and despite having a bit of a technical jank, it was one of the most well-received FPS games of the entire year. Many longtime fans felt it was absolutely worth the wait. It was paid off. The game takes place in a post-nuclear apocalypse. You have to explore the wasteland. You try to avoid enemy survivors, mutated monsters, elements themselves. It's a nice blend of open world FPS and survival horror with a pretty interesting story to go on the background to tie it all together. Now, despite the mixed reviews from critics, Stalker 2 was a gigantic sales success and has a passionate community, so give it a try. Don't let the negative critic reviews deter you from this. It's a fantastic game, just not the kind of thing that professional critics like, which I'm here to tell you, most of those critics aren't even gamers, so don't really listen to them. At number 8, Crysis. Some would argue that this game isn't technically an open world FPS, but I'm going to put it on the list because I think you could easily make the argument that it is a proper open world game. The disagreement comes from the fact that there's not one giant map that you can freely roam around, but rather a bunch of huge sections that you can approach in a way that you see fit. So even though it's not technically open world in the modern sense of the term, it's definitely much closer to open world than most FPS games are, and it had a huge impact on the way open world FPS games are designed. Franchises like Far Cry simply wouldn't exist without Crysis, and I still think it's a fantastic game that scratches the itch as other proper open world games do. You wander around gorgeous landscapes, you assess your surroundings before you decide on how you want to handle the situation, how you want to take out the enemies before you proceed to the next objective. Sounds kind of open world to me. Despite being released in 2007, still looks incredible. Don't even bother with the remastered version, just get the OG version and the graphics will still blow your mind. At number 7, Rage 2. It's one of those games that was never going to live up to its own hype. That's kind of what doomed it to the bargain bin. The game was released in May of 2019. It was a sequel to an ID Software game from 2011, but since then, ID has gone on to make the amazing Doom reboots. It was very clear that Rage 2 was trying to bank off the hype of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal while still staying true to the open world format of the first Rage game, and it made the marketing kind of confusing. But when you judge Rage 2 on its own, it's actually a really fun open world FPS. Sure, it has flaws, and it also has very obvious that the developers were trying to copy Doom, but that's not a bad thing because it worked pretty well. The action is nuts, the environments are pretty, the open world is well designed, fun to explore. It is a very different experience from the first Rage game, and some would argue that the original is more tightly designed, but if you're looking for this ridiculous over-the-top open world FPS that takes notes from new Doom games, I mean, Rage 2 might be your cup of tea. At number 6, Far Cry 5. Now, Far Cry as a franchise has fallen off the radar in recent years because Ubisoft spamming open world games at us every 6 months isn't the right strategy, but that's not to say there hasn't been bright spots. Far Cry 5 was released in 2018. Brought the franchise to the United States. It lets you run wild in an open world recreation of the Montana wilderness after this small town gets taken over by a cult and your helicopter crash lands here. The open world is stunning. The story is actually really interesting once it gets going and all the main characters are well established. The gameplay, it was a perfect representation of Far Cry. You kept all the great pillars that made the franchise great while you added in a new few features and quality of life adjustments. Plus, since it's almost 7 years old at this point, which is crazy to say, you shouldn't have any trouble running it on modern PC or gaming consoles. Give it a try. Ubisoft games have a bit of a bad rep now, but Far Cry 5, it's worth your time. Now we arrive at the top 5. Fallout 4. A lot of longtime Fallout fans took issue with the fact that Fallout 4 was more of a straightforward shooter than a traditional RPG, but if you go into the game with managed expectations, it's a lot of fun, especially with mods. Fallout 4 tells you that you're supposed to be wandering around the post-apocalyptics looking for your missing child, but in reality, you're going to be wandering around killing enemy factions, building bases, enjoying the atmosphere, meeting goofy characters, installing 5 million different mods to make it even better. Again, it's not going to satisfy you if you're going into it expecting something like Fallout 3 or New Vegas, which were more traditional RPGs. But if you go into it expecting an open world shooter with RPG elements, you'll have fun. Plus, it's got this massive update not too long ago, so it plays better than ever on console and PC. Never a better time to dive in. At number 4, Dying Light. I have to ask you, does this count as an FPS? It's more of a melee-focused game as opposed to a true shooter, but then again, it's a first-person game with a lot of combat. There's plenty of guns at your disposal, so here it is. Dying Light was released back in 2015. Remains one of the most popular zombie games on the market because of the extremely refined gameplay. Has amazing parkour movement systems. The engaging open world takes place in a fictional Middle Eastern city following a zombie outbreak, and it actually has some pretty interesting zombie AI. They'll be slow and kind of clumsy, methodical by day, but then they get really, really fast and aggressive when the sun goes down. So you have to do all your looting and exploration that you possibly can while the sun is out, because once it goes down, you have to hunker down. It's also a really fun co-op mode here where you and your buddy can explore the city together, try to avoid the armies of the undead. Now, despite being a decade old, it's still getting updates. And according to Steam charts, there are literally thousands of people playing it at any given time, which is kind of cool. I don't think anyone expected this game to have such longevity, but it does. At number 3, Metro Exodus. Started out as a Stalker-style horror FPS set in a post-nuclear apocalypse, but while the first 2 Metro games had you primarily living underground, Exodus brings you up to the surface. Full-fledged open world for you to explore, which not only gives you a new perspective on the franchise, but also gives you way more space to work with than you've ever had. Similar to Crysis, it can be argued that the game isn't technically open world, but I'm going to put it on the list because it scratches the open world FPS itch better than a lot of proper open world games do. There's a lot of really satisfying weapons, gadgets, all kinds of stuff to use. There's interesting maps, combat encounters. It's fun. The game is gorgeous. If you want some good eye candy with great gameplay and a unique atmosphere, put it in your backlog. At number 2, Cyberpunk 2077. Don't let the horrible launch fool you. Cyberpunk is a really good game right now, and if the game had launched like this, it would be called one of the best RPGs ever made. This first-person RPG takes place in the, you guessed it, year 2077, has you playing as a mercenary, trying to uncover various conspiracies, make alliances, upgrade your weapons, yeah. The gameplay is super deep. It's also replayable, because all the customization and the sheer number of deviations you can take as the story progresses. Now, I'm a little bitter about how the game launched, because I'll never be okay with the trend of launching games busted and fixing them in post, but ultimately, the game is good. It's definitely worth another look if you haven't. Plus, it has Keanu Reeves, so there you go. And at number 1 today, I went with Far Cry 3. Out of all the open world FPS games ever released, it's probably the most influential for better or for worse. A lot of modern open world FPS games use the same template for their storytelling, their mission design, and that trend started with Far Cry 3, but that's not to say this game doesn't deserve to have a hearty legacy. Far Cry 3 is an extremely good game. It aged very well. You play as a dude who crashes on a deserted island and whose friends are taken captive by pirates, at which point he has to explore the island, survive the elements, learn how to get really good at shooting, looting. He has to fight back and save his friends, but will he really save them when the time comes? Far Cry 3's gameplay is a bit more structured than the first 2 games, but in a good way. You can approach combat encounters in a number of ways, and the more you expand your skill set, the more manageable the open world becomes. Far Cry 3's mission structure had a huge impact on the way open world FPS games are designed to this day. Despite being over 12 years old, it plays extremely well. And did I mention it has one of the best villains we've ever seen in video games? Let me know one open world FPS game that was deserving of being on this list that I forgot, and I'll see you soon.